Moose versus EC3. We have finally a bit of better indication as to what EC3's plans are now that he has returned to Impact Wrestling. Now, we've seen a few promos recently by EC3 since he's returned to Impact Wrestling, and we've touched on who he's attacked because this is all part of this video here. But we've seen a few promos, vignettes on Impact Wrestling so far of EC3. The first one, he spoke about having the longest undefeated streak in TNA history. He talked about beating the likes of Sting, Bully Ray, Kurt Angle for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. He said, "Look, I have a victim list full of TNA Hall of Famers." He even played his old EC3 Trouble, Trouble, Trouble theme, which makes me think that maybe when he does eventually have the match, when he returns to Impact Wrestling, his first in-ring match, I'm not sure if we're going to have his old EC3 Trouble theme, which if that is the case, that absolutely sucks. I love that theme. And they did play it a few weeks ago on Impact, but maybe it looks like we're not going to have that. EC3 is going to have a new feud, a new theme for this feud going forward. So that's a little bit disappointing. But he spoke about his past in Impact Wrestling, as I mentioned, beating big names, TNA Hall of Famers, even his old theme. And he said, who cares? He says he has to go back down his old road. He has to destroy it piece by piece. If he's going to control his narrative, he has to destroy his past. He made reference, which I'm sure some people liked, he made reference to empty promises in Impact and WWE. He said it's not about brass rings being buried or not being used right. So we're playing up on the exit from WWE, shall we say. He said that every time he looks in the mirror, he sees a reflection of failure, and the failure is personal. And he says that's not to say that I haven't achieved anything in my career. That's certainly not the case. I have achieved lots of things, but for every step I took, for every achievement that I accomplished, every win that I got came at the expense of my soul, which was quite a nice line. He spoke about not fearing his past, but his past is his biggest foe. He said he must break every attachment in his past to prove his future. He must destroy the past to take back his power, and ended with the control your narrative tagline. So that was the opening one. So it was very cryptic. He's just playing on as I mentioned, the exit from WWE. What is EC3 going to be doing now that he's back in Impact Wrestling, and just a continuation of the control your narrative story that he's been telling on social media in the months prior to his Impact Wrestling debut. But the promo this past week on Impact Wrestling really did show where EC3 is going to go in the future when it comes to Impact Wrestling. He named former TNA World Heavyweight Champion Kurt Angle, Sting, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Robert Roode, and then ended it with Carter. Of course, EC3 stands for Ethan Carter III, so that is referencing himself as a former TNA World Heavyweight Champion. And he openly spoke about, look, everything I've ever wanted to do, I've achieved. But he also, again, takes some more subtle shots and subtle hints at WWE, saying that he was punished by a fan base. He also took a shot at Impact Wrestling's past when it comes to the previous owners of the company. He says feuding entities for this corporation, which was a reference to Dixie Carter and Billy Corgan's fight and lawsuit over who actually owned the company. Of course, now it's owned by Anthem Entertainment. But that whole drama when it comes to Billy Corgan, Dixie Carter, and that just mess. Again, he made reference to it there. He also spoke about being punished by the true top 1% of the business for a name that he inherited. So by that, he's referencing those top 1% of the professional wrestling business, which is, of course, Vince McMahon, speculating that he could be punished there because he had the last name Carter, or just the name EC3. And it's interesting because, of course, he came into WWE as EC3, which is a TNA creation or an Impact Wrestling creation. And everyone knew at that time that just ain't gonna fly. It just isn't. It isn't gonna fly. And some people will say, well, what about Samoa Joe and Bobby Roode and AJ Styles? Well, in reality, they weren't creations of Impact Wrestling. They had those names prior to that. They had those names in AJ Styles' case in WCW or in the independent scene, or Samoa Joe had it in Ring of Honor and on the independent scene. Bobby Roode, that is an Impact one, I suppose, but I don't know if it's a complete creation. You know what I mean? A very big gimmick that was created by Impact Wrestling. Whereas EC3, it's the whole gimmick at the start was that he was the nephew of the owner, the president, Dixie Carter, and he comes into WWE not as Ethan Carter III, but as EC3, and it makes you sort of, At the time, a lot of people were going, "Oh, he kept the name. That's interesting," because some people, I guess, assumed he was going to go back to Derek Bateman, that great name that was. But it's true. You know, some people in WWE were like, "Why are we giving him this TNA name? What's going on with that?" So that was an interesting line. He once again spoke about controlling his past. He said, to find freedom, you must control your past. And then he moved on to the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, of course, which is currently held by Moose. It's no longer an active World Championship. It's more of a hood ornament of a championship at this point. It's not an active championship, you know. You've got the Impact World Championship, which has lineage, of course, of the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. This is just a past iteration. It's the same as the $1 Million Championship that Ted DiBiase had. It's the same as the FTW Championship that Taz had and Brian Cage now has. It's just a hood ornament for the character, really. But EC3 mentions that at one point, the TNA World Heavyweight Championship was the manifestation of excellence. He said it was his personal goal, but it was also his personal demise. So he said that the reason that he's in Impact Wrestling now is that it's for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. He said, "There's no battle I won't fight, no hell I won't endure to reclaim the TNA World Heavyweight Championship." His sole purpose for being in Impact Wrestling right now, returning to the company that made him famous, is to win the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. And most importantly, not only win the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, but burn the legacy of the TNA World Heavyweight Championship and burn the legacy of TNA to the ground. He then says that Moose has been warned and does the whole control your narrative again. So this confirms what I've been speculating for a while, that EC3 versus Moose is in the plans and is going to be happening in Impact Wrestling in the near future. Obviously, we knew that was going to happen with the previous hype that they'd done. Of course, a couple of months ago now, while we were on the road to Slammiversary, Moose defended the TNA World Heavyweight Championship against Hernandez on Impact Wrestling. As he won the match, whose music would play but the old EC3 Trouble, Trouble, Trouble music would play. Everyone was confused. Moose was confused. The announcers were confused. Josh Matthews sold it. What's going on? What's going on? And then eventually Moose's theme played once again. But that was the first seed being planted that we were going to have EC3 versus Moose in the near future. And then, of course, we had Moose respond to this on social media. He would do a promo, a vignette mocking EC3 before EC3 had even returned to the company. And then a couple of weeks ago on the Impact After Slammiversary, EC3 would appear in the Impact Zone after Moose defeated, who was it, Falabar? I think he defeated for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. EC3 would appear out of the crowd, even though there wasn't one, but somewhere in the arena wearing a towel over his head, akin to the old Taz in ECW, and attacked Moose. And now in this promo, he's confirming that Moose is the guy that he's going after on his return to Impact Wrestling. He's going to try and remove this TNA past from Impact Wrestling, but also remove the TNA past from himself too. This is a complete reinvention and re-emergence of EC3 in Impact Wrestling. This isn't Ethan Carter III. This isn't the old EC3 that we became familiar with in TNA and Impact Wrestling in the past. This is something completely different. So I think that's very interesting. And I think this means that we're going to probably get EC3 versus Moose at the Impact Emergence event. Impact Emergence is a 2-week special that Impact are doing on Access TV over the next couple of weeks. I believe it's August, is it 15th and 22nd? I might have my dates wrong there. But it's a similar, akin to AEW doing Fyter Fest over 2 weeks on TNT, NXT, WWE doing the Great American Bash over 2 weeks on the USA Network. I think it's a really smart choice. We've done a full video about the announcement, the breakdown, what to expect, possible matches, what we've heard so far, etc. So be sure to check that out on the channel. I'll put a link in the description box below to the Impact Emergence video. But it looks like we're going to get Moose versus EC3 for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship at that event. And I think we've spoken about this briefly when it comes to Moose and when it comes to the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. Of course, I'm a massive, massive fan of bringing back the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. I was a fan of TNA back in the day. It had its faults, but I look back on it with fond memories. I watched it quite a lot growing up. I do enjoy that TNA World Heavyweight Championship design. I think it's a beautiful title belt, even though it's not the real one. The real one, I guess, is lost or somewhere. That was a knockoff that was actually made in Pakistan, the one that Moose currently has. It's not the old TNA World Heavyweight Championship, not the actual one. It's a replica. And I've really enjoyed the whole story of, looking back on the past and bringing TNA back to Impact Wrestling. I've enjoyed that part of it. And this is obviously all meant to happen because of the TNA There's No Place Like Home event back in April during WrestleMania weekend in Orlando or Tampa or wherever. But it didn't happen, obviously, due to the pandemic. The event was cancelled, scrapped, as were most things WrestleMania weekend. And TNA still persisted with the storyline anyway. Moose is TNA World Heavyweight Champion, Motor City Machine Guns returning, etc., etc. But eventually, I suppose the title has to go away at some point, unless they're bringing back TNA full-time, which I would still like. I've mentioned before that I think they could, if they wanted to, do a brand split. We'll touch on that in a second. But if it's just for a storyline, eventually the TNA World Heavyweight Championship and the whole TNA concept has to go away. It's obviously fun bringing it back. There's nostalgia in bringing it back, and it brings back a lot of memories, as I've spoken about. But eventually it does have to go away. And I think that's going to be EC3's role here. I think EC3 is going to win the eventual match between Moose and EC3. And I think he's going to win the TNA World Heavyweight Championship for the third time. And I think by doing that, he's going to remove TNA from Impact Wrestling. Not immediately, but I think that's going to be the plan. And as far as, EC3 returning to the company, I think it's a smart introduction feud. As I mentioned in the Hype to Slammiversary and during all the Slammiversary videos we've done on this, I was under the assumption, or I thought that we were going to get EC3 as the mystery competitor in the main event of Slammiversary. I was pretty confident we were going to see EC3 debut, and we did. I thought it was going to be as in an in-ring role, and we haven't actually seen EC3 compete in an Impact Wrestling ring as of yet. I think that will happen for the first time at Impact Emergence. But I thought he was going to be part of that Impact World Championship main event at Slammiversary. That wasn't the case. So if you're not going to throw him straight into the world title picture because you've now got a babyface champion in Eddie Edwards, it makes sense to introduce him in another way and in as a creative way as possible. So I think this is a great introduction feud for EC3 going up against Moose. I think it makes a lot of sense that way. He's got history with the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. As he mentioned, a former two-time TNA World Heavyweight Champion. Also, as he's mentioned in his promos, he has a lot of history with former TNA World Heavyweight Champions, specifically that version of the title as well, and has faced a lot of TNA Hall of Famers in the past. You remember when he first debuted of Impact Wrestling, he just, not only was he unbeaten for, was it like a year or something like that, he beat some massive, massive guys. As he mentioned, Kurt Angle, Samoa Joe, Sting, all sorts of names and massive names, not only in Impact Wrestling and TNA history, but in professional wrestling history in general. So he needs to be booked the right way going forward in Impact Wrestling because he's one of the biggest stars that they have right now. So should he have gone straight for the Impact World Championship into the main event of Slammiversary? Possibly, but now we know that the way that they're going with the Impact World Championship, and we know that they wanted to have Eddie Edwards become the world champion, then absolutely it was the right call to not have EC3 in the main event. Because if you wanted to go with Eddie Edwards, that means EC3 would have had to lose at some point in that match. That's not smart. And immediately challenge him for the world title. Eddie Edwards is the babyface champion at the moment, the underdog, Daniel Bryan style babyface. So again, it doesn't make sense for EC3 to immediately challenge Eddie Edwards on his return to Impact Wrestling. So I think that's a smart move by Impact Wrestling as the booking of EC3. I think what potentially we could see though, and this is going to be my prediction for Impact Emergence and this whole Moose versus EC3 storyline, I think that EC3 is going to not only defeat Moose for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, but he is going to be the facilitator that the TNA World Heavyweight Championship goes away. But that's not going to be by defeating Moose and then just throwing the TNA World Heavyweight Championship in the bin. I think what I would like to see happen, and if I was booking Impact Wrestling, what I would do is I'd have EC3 beat Moose for the Impact TNA World Heavyweight Championship, and then by that point you've got about August, September, October, maybe about 6 weeks or so till Bound for Glory. You can do a proper good build to Bound for Glory. And what should your main event be for Bound for Glory? Well, it should be Eddie Edwards versus EC3 for both the Impact World Championship and the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. That makes the most sense to me. That's a big match. There's a lot of gold on the line there, and it would just be very interesting to see. You've got Eddie Edwards, the Impact World Champion, and then you've got EC3, the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, and then you truly find out who is the real World Champion. I would have EC3 win that match between him and Eddie Edwards because I just think he's just a bigger star. Obviously, I'm a fan of Eddie Edwards. I think what they've done with him recently is good, and I think he's okay as a babyface underdog champion, but I think EC3 would have to win that. So I predict that we're going to have Moose versus EC3 at Impact Emergence. EC3 wins the TNA World Heavyweight Championship and then challenges Eddie Edwards to a unification match at Bound for Glory in October. It's the biggest event of the year for Impact Wrestling. It's their WrestleMania. It's always been hyped up as their WrestleMania, their biggest show of the year. How do you main event the biggest show of the year in the year that the momentum's really returned back to Impact Wrestling, and we're starting to see people watch Impact Wrestling and talk about Impact Wrestling again and have interest in the product. The product's been very good on Impact Wrestling for a very, very long time now, at least 3 years. But at this point, right now, Impact has had the most momentum it's had for a very, very long time. It has the most positivity around it that it has for a long time. Impact Wrestling was, for the last 5 years or so, was always known as the company that was on its last legs, had more lives than a 9-lived cat. It's got so much momentum now, and so many people are talking about it. So, one, it's very, very smart for them to do the Impact Emergence show, keep that momentum going. But when it comes to your biggest event of the year, you've got to do something that was bigger than Slammiversary, and Slammiversary was a huge event. So how do you top Slammiversary? Well, you top it by doing the biggest match you can possibly do on your roster, which at the moment, in my opinion, is a unification match between EC3, the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, and the Impact World Champion, Eddie Edwards. That makes the most sense. You then have a undisputed world champion. You can play it up as, modern day Impact versus old school TNA, two worlds colliding, two world champions from different parts of TNA. It just makes and Impact Wrestling, it just makes a lot of sense, and would be something that I myself would be definitely interested in seeing, and I think a lot of people would be talking about it for sure. It would have two worlds colliding. You'd have Impact versus TNA, and it'd be a lot of fun to watch and a lot of fun to see that story unfold. Although I will push this one time. I said I mentioned the brand split. I still think there is a possibility. I don't think there's a possibility in that Impact will do it, because I don't think they will do it. But I think they could if they wanted to. That's probably better to put it. I would love to see a brand split in Impact Wrestling. Now, before people say that's not possible, you don't have the roster for it, the size, I get that, and that is probably true. However, I think pieces are there for it to happen for Impact Wrestling, and I'll tell you how. So you've got the TNA World Heavyweight Champion at the moment, it's Moose. You've also got the Impact Wrestling World Champion in Eddie Edwards. You've got Impact Wrestling, which is owned by Anthem. You've got Access TV, which is a station or a network owned by Anthem. They can put whatever program they want on there, right? On whatever day, whenever they want. Why not split Impact Wrestling? Impact Wrestling is currently a 2-hour broadcast every Tuesday. Why not split Impact Wrestling to a 1-hour show on a Tuesday? So you've got Impact Wrestling, 1 hour show on a Tuesday. Thursday, the traditional television time slot for TNA Wrestling. Why don't you change that? Why don't you take the hour that you've taken away from Impact Wrestling and move it to TNA Wrestling on a Thursday? So you have 1 hour Tuesday of Impact, and you have 1 hour on Thursday of TNA. Two separate brands. One Impact World Champion in Eddie Edwards on a Tuesday. One TNA World Heavyweight Champion on a Thursday. You've got the 4-sided ring for Impact Wrestling. You've got the 6-sided ring for TNA Wrestling. Of course, there's a lot more logistics you'd have to work out there. But people will say, what about champions? How about you've got a world champion for each show, but the remaining champions can go back and forth between either show? You don't have to do a brand split the same way WWE's done it. I think it could work. I think you already do 2 hours of television anyway, so the tapings would pretty much be the same. Just change the graphics, change the ring aprons and ring skirts, and then boom, you're done. Then obviously you'd have to set up the ring, I suppose, would be slightly different, so there might be some logistical problems in that. But Access TV is owned by Anthem, and they own Impact. They can change the schedule whatever they want. Just instead of having 1 2-hour show, have 2 1-hour shows. Why not? I think it would certainly be interesting, and again, get people talking. How would it do in the ratings? I don't know. But it's something I think that they should consider. Maybe that's me just fantasy booking, and it will never happen. I don't think it will, but it would certainly be a lot of fun, and I would be interested in that. I'd be behind that kind of idea, I really would. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Moose versus EC3 seemingly going to happen at Impact Emergence for the TNA World Heavyweight Championship? Who do you think will win? Are you interested in a Moose versus EC3 feud? What are your thoughts on the TNA World Heavyweight Championship? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. I really enjoy interacting with you guys on this channel. If you have enjoyed this video, please do give us a like. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen any of our videos already. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. We're closing in on 700 subscribers. Once we get to 1,000 subscribers, that big aim, big long-term goal of 1,000 subscribers, we'll be doing a lot more live streams and watch-alongs and reactions and all of that fun stuff. So the quicker we get there, we can do some really fun and exciting content on here. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. If you have subscribed already, just know I'm very, very thankful. It means the world to me, and I'm humbled that you would take the time out of your day to listen to any of these videos, watch these videos, or anything like that. It's just about chatting about wrestling on this channel and just trying to share your opinions and interact with each other. That's what I think as wrestling fans should do. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe. But if you have already, just know it really does mean a lot. You can also follow us on our social media platforms. The handles are on the screen right now. The links are in the description box below. It's at 365 Wrestle on Twitter and at Wrestle News 365 on Facebook and Instagram. So if you haven't already, please do give us a like or a follow there. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.